Well, hello everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of Car on the Hauler, my post-race show where every week I discuss the events from the Craftsman Truck Series, the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series, and of course, the NASCAR Cup Series. You may be watching this on YouTube or listening on Spotify. I would greatly appreciate a follow, a subscribe, like, comment, and also follow any of our other social medias, whether it's Pace Car Boys or myself, Trackside Larry. But let's get to it. We had a very busy weekend this past weekend as the Truck Series visited St. Pete, and then the NASCAR Cup Series and the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series went to Circuit of the Americas, also known as COTA. Overall, a very great weekend for racing. Of course, NASCAR, the Truck Series at least, had a doubleheader weekend with the IndyCar Series, and next week, the IndyCar Series will also be having a doubleheader with the NASCAR Cup Series, and then also throw in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series in the mix, plus the ARCA Menards Series in Phoenix. All right, before we end up actually going through all the races, I thought I'd go through the top 10 results, the updating points, and then, of course, quickly go over who our weekend winners were. Our weekend winners for the COTA weekend. Of course, in the Craftsman Truck Series, you had Lane Riggs win for Front Row Motorsports in the number 34. In the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series, you had Shane Van Gisbergen win in the number 9 for Junior Motorsports. And then, of course, in the NASCAR Cup Series, winning 3 in a row, driving the number 45 for 2311 Racing, you had Tyler Reddick. What a fantastic win from all 3 of these drivers. All 3 of them were extremely pumped to get to victory lane. What a weekend from these 3 drivers. Have to give them all the credit in the world. All right, now let's take a look at our top 10 results from the weekend, starting with the Craftsman Truck Series. Lane Riggs just put on a hell of a performance. Great job from him. And then we look at second place, Ty Majeski, and what could have been. He made an error in the late laps, and I'll be talking about that in a little bit. He made an error with around 20 laps to go. If he didn't make that error, maybe Majeski would have won the inaugural event at St. Pete. In third place was Ben Rhodes, and honestly, I thought Ben Rhodes was going to end up winning this thing with how dominant he was at the beginning of this race. The Thor Sport cars looked strong in general. Chandler Smith, what a start to the season for Chandler Smith. He could have potentially won all 3 of these races to start the year. What a fantastic start for Chandler Smith. Front Row Motorsports as a whole in the Craftsman Truck Series look insanely good. And then we look at Caden Honeycutt in the number 11 for Tricon. He had a great day. I don't think he got the finish that he probably wanted, but ran in the top 5, top 3, pretty much all race long. Great performance from him. And then we look at Landen Lewis. I'll talk a little bit more about Landen Lewis in a little bit, but Landen Lewis, he's the future of the sport. I think he's going to have many great years ahead of him. I think he's going to be competing with Connor Zilisch, with Corey Heim, with Brent Cruz for wins, potentially championships in the future in the Cup Series. And then Andres Perez, very sneaky surprise start of the season for Andres Perez. Just fantastic. Fantastic from Andres Perez. I've been very impressed by him. Daniel Hemrick. I think Hemrick's a very good road course racer, so honestly, him finishing 8th was a little bit of a surprise. I did expect him to perform a little bit better than what he did, but still getting a top 10, a good points day. And then Colin Braun, he ran really well. I wouldn't say he had insane speed, but Colin Braun, who hasn't raced in NASCAR in quite a bit of time, ran really well all race long. I would like to see him potentially race in a couple more races. Continues the top 10s for Ram, and Ram overall has gotten off to a better start of the year than I really expected him to. Obviously, they don't even have a sim. They don't have a simulation. So the fact that Colin Braun was able to get a top 10, very impressive. And then one of the big stories of the day was James Hinchcliffe, Jimmy Hinch. One of the big stories of the day. Ran top 5, top 10, all race long. Got spun around twice and still managed to come back for a top 10. So good on James Hinchcliffe. Now we'll move on to the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series top 10. SVG getting the win. I don't think that is much as a surprise. He's just such a phenomenal road course racer and does it again. He does it again, and I'll talk more about SVG in a little bit. And then Austin Hill, I think I saw this was his third second place finish at COTA. Austin Hill is a very sneaky good road course racer. I think that's also just because Austin Hill is a great driver. I've been very open about the way I feel about Austin Hill. I think he's very hypocritical at times and stuff like that. And sometimes he does the wrong thing, like intentionally wrecking somebody at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. But he's a great driver. He's a fantastic race car driver, one of the most talented drivers in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series, and continues to prove that he may be ready for a Cup Series ride. Third, Sammy Smith was honestly pretty quiet throughout the day. I would say he was fairly quiet, but ended up coming home for a third place finish, just kept it clean all race long. And I would almost say the same thing for Jesse Love. I would say for the most part was pretty quiet. I thought it was pretty funny when when it looked like he was potentially paying back our fifth place driver, Corey Day, after Corey Day spun out his best friend Connor Zilisch. Jesse Love door to the crap out of Corey Day. I don't know if that's because of what he did to Zilisch or maybe something else, but I thought that was pretty funny. They would do anything for each other. Those two are the bestest friends. So that was pretty interesting to see. And then Corey Day. Corey Day showed a lot of speed, and we'll talk more about Corey Day in a minute. But Corey Day showed a lot of speed throughout the race and once again shows that he is a pure, raw talent, but still needs to clean it up in some areas, and we will talk about that. Then we got Brent Cruz. Brent Cruz in sixth place. I will be talking about Brent Cruz in a little bit as well. I have so much high hopes for Brent Cruz. I think this kid is going to be very, very special. And then William Sawalich with a very good run. Sawalich has overall started off the season pretty well, and hopefully he can continue that up because he still has the momentum from last season. And then you have Justin Allgaier, Lil Gator, getting an eighth place finish. Not a bad race, but I definitely had a little higher expectations for Lil Gator. I thought he would get a little bit of a better finish out there today. And then Ross Chastain, I would probably say the same thing. I probably had a little bit higher expectations than what I got and ended up getting that ninth place finish. And then you see in 10th place that I mistyped Brennan Poole, a little bit of a typo right there if you are watching on YouTube. It's not Benin Poole, it's Brennan Poole. And Brennan Poole, how about Brennan Poole? He raced really well last year. I think he raced a lot better last season for Alpha Prime than I think a lot of people expected. And he's carried that in to this season. And I'll take a look at the points here in a second, but he would be in the chase right now if he would start. So what a fantastic start of the year for Brennan Poole. Got to be very happy for Brennan. Then we move on to the NASCAR Cup Series top 10. Tyler Reddick. What else could I say? Three in a row for Reddick. SVG put the pressure on him, but eventually began to fall into the clutches of our third place driver, Christopher Bell, who ended up driving up there on the fresh tires, won the event last year, wasn't quite able to go back to back. And then how about Baby Gibbs, Ty Gibbs? After all the drama and all the crazy stuff that's happened this week and how his name has been talked about, able to get that fourth place finish after his very difficult start of the year, I would say is pretty impressive. And then Michael McDowell, he ran top 5 all race long. Michael McDowell was one of the best cars in the field, ran top 5 all race long, and got 5th place. Great from him. You got Kyle Larson in 6th. I think some people might have saw the tweet before the race. I think Jeff Gluck put it out that his race team were actually potentially worried about some sort of engine issues. They were getting some data back, and they were worried about some potential engine issues, but he ended up running the full race, got a 6th place finish. You had Chase Elliott get 7th. Good race from Chase, a very quiet race from Chase. Once again, just showing how consistent he is. And then Ryan Blaney with the 8th place finish. I think there is an argument to be made that Ryan Blaney was the best in the field, but he clearly struggled once there was more wear on his tires, once they got longer on the run. I personally think he should have done what Bell and Gibbs did and took 4 tires, because if he did do that, I think Blaney could have very well competed for the win. I think he definitely would have gotten at least 2nd. I think he would have gotten past SVG and maybe even gotten to Tyler Reddick, but that's Monday morning quarterbacking or Monday morning crew chiefing, I guess. Then we had 9th, AJ Allmendinger, who had a very scary moment after the race. Seemed to be extremely dehydrated because of his cool suit and his helmet air AC failing, but still managed to get a top 10. And then Dennis the Menace, Denny Hamlin, gets a top 10 on a road course. He's talked very openly how he thinks he sucks at road courses, and he always shows speed in qualifying, but never in the race. And today, with a couple laps left, he was running in the top 5, ended up falling back to 10th, but a good performance from Denny Hamlin. Now let's look at the points update for all 3 series. In the Craftsman Truck Series, Chandler Smith with a great points lead, 34 points above Ben Rhodes, and then Ty Majeski, 50 points back at Chandler Smith. Majeski could have gotten himself a lot more points if he didn't make that late error, but still nonetheless third in points. And then we go to the bubble battle. Look at 7th place, Andres Perez, 67 points behind Chandler Smith. Once again, what a start of the year for Andres Perez. He is really impressing me the way he's started off this year. Extremely strong start for Andres Perez. And then in 8th, we have Stuart Friesen, Stewie, only a couple points above the cut line. Then we have Christian Eckes, who had a very difficult day. I honestly expected Christian Eckes to compete for the win. Some of you that watched my preview for COTA in St. Pete last week, the Larry's Trackside teaser, I predicted Eckes to win the race. After practice, I did change my mind on that. I didn't pick him to win the race. I picked Gio Ruggiero as my race day pick. But nonetheless, Eckes just couldn't get it done. He didn't have a very good day. Got involved in a couple of accidents throughout the race. Just wasn't his day. He definitely struggled at St. Pete. Justin Haley looked like he was going to have a very good day. Had his issues as well. He was probably the best running Ram truck all race long up until near the end of this thing. But he's currently on the bubble in 10th place. And then right outside, 1 point behind, it's his Ram colleague teammate of Brendan Butterbean Queen, 1 point outside of the chase. And then Tyler Ankrum in 12th in points, 3 points outside the chase. And now we'll look at the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series. Austin Hill with a very strong start of the year. All 3 of the points leaders, by the way, have gotten off to a phenomenal start to the year. Austin Hill, 104 points, great way to start the year. 28 points above his teammate, Jesse Love, and 39 points above Justin Allgaier in 3rd. And then we'll look at the bubble battle. Parker Retzlaff didn't have nearly as good of a race as I expected. Honestly, struggled quite a bit. I expected him to have much better, little hiccup right there, much better of a race than he ended up having. Ends up falling down to 9th in points, 73 points back of Austin Hill. And then you have Sam Mayer, 76 points back of Austin Hill. I thought Sam Mayer was going to potentially compete for the win at the end of this thing. And a lot of the drivers that were very fast, other than SVG, ended up having some issues in the final stage. Then we look at Brandon Jones, who's only a couple of points above the cut line in 11th. Overall, has just stayed out of trouble, hasn't really done anything special to start the year, but being consistent, staying out of trouble, and that's what I would usually expect from Brandon Jones. That's why he's had so much success in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series. And then we look at Brendan Poole. Amazing. Great start for Brendan Poole. I think he's going to be a legitimate contender to make the chase. He's had a fantastic start for the year. He has so much experience. He always gets the most out of his equipment that he possibly could. He's been around for many years at this point, so it's really great to see Brendan Poole doing well. And he's only 1 point in front of Taylor Gray in 13th, and then 4 points in front of William Sawalich in 14th. So 2 Joe Gibbs Racing drivers right outside looking to get into the chase. And then we'll look at the NASCAR Cup Series. Tyler Reddick has a 70-point advantage. 70-point advantage on Bubba Wallace after winning 3 straight races. The most amount of points you can get in a race is 75. This is insane. This is, actually no, it's probably 76, including the fastest lap. So my bad on that. 76 points. So for Tyler Reddick to have this big of a points lead after 3 races is nutty. And what a start of the year for 23XI Racing. Bubba Wallace has had a great year, 2 top 10s to start the year, and then today he finished 11th on a road course, which probably feels pretty good for Bubba. Bubba not being necessarily the strongest road course racer, even though he has improved at the road courses quite a bit over the last year or two. And then Chase Elliott, third in points. It's the same top three in points as we had last week. Chase Elliott, 2 points behind Bubba and 72 points behind Tyler Reddick. And then we go down to our bubble battle. 13th in points, we have William Byron. And it's really close for this bubble battle for the Chase cut line in the Cup Series. We have William Byron at 110 points back of Tyler Reddick. Then we have Zane Smith, and he got caught up in that incident with Zilisch pretty late in this event. Maybe he could have gotten a top 10 out there. 111 points back of Tyler Reddick. And then we have Kyle Larson, 113 points back of Tyler Reddick. And then Ryan Preece, who's had a pretty quiet start to the year for the most part. Obviously, he had the win at Bowman Gray, but these last 2 weeks and then this week, he's just been staying out of trouble, running well, had an okay performance. He's not necessarily the strongest road course racer. 118 points back of Tyler Reddick. And then Baby Gibbs made up a bunch of points. He was running way back in the standings before this race, but made up a bunch of points with his performance. Only 3 points back of Ryan Preece. And then you have Noah Gragson. And Noah Gragson, he struggled. He was probably, out of every driver today in the Cup race, I think he's probably the one that struggled the most. Had a very difficult day and fell out of the chase in a tie with Ty Gibbs. And I would also like to note, not featured on the graphic, 19th in points, Ty Dillon is also tied. So Ty Gibbs, Ty Dillon, and Noah Gragson are all tied for the first driver outside of the chase, 3 points back of Ryan Preece heading into Phoenix Raceway. So the Cup Series and the O'Reilly Series are heading to Phoenix Raceway, while the trucks are off for the next 2 weeks and will be back for Darlington. But let's get to all the events that we had, and we'll start, of course, with the Craftsman Truck Series in St. Petersburg. And before I get to the actual events in this race, I was very pleasantly surprised by the racing I saw in the Truck Series. An overall very entertaining race from start to finish. Just a great race. Some of you that have been here long enough know how I feel about street courses. I'm okay with street courses as long as we're bringing it to areas in the country that we've never been before. And when they announced the schedule for this year and they decided to run the Truck Series at St. Pete, while the Cup Series and the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series were in Austin, Texas at Circuit of the Americas, I was a little upset. I was almost distraught about it. I was pretty pissed. I'm not going to fake. And I personally didn't think at that time that the Truck Series would have put on a very good event at St. Petersburg. But overall, a very entertaining event. The track was actually a little bit more roomier, and there was more passing areas on the racetrack than I thought there would be, personally. Yeah, great racing all weekend long for the Craftsman Truck Series. Unfortunately, practice ended up getting rained out after only getting a couple laps in. There was no qualifying, so we had a very funky lineup in the race. Like, you had Connor Mozak up front, you had James Hinchcliffe and Dario Franchitti starting up near the front. A very funky starting lineup, I would say, to this thing because of the season just starting and us getting the rain, which it is what it is. That's just how the cookie crumbles, I guess, sometimes. But it was a great weekend of racing in St. Petersburg as a whole. I also saw the IndyCar Series race a little bit earlier today. I am recording this on Sunday night, and I pleasantly enjoyed the IndyCar Series race as well. I'm definitely a NASCAR fan over IndyCar Series, but the IndyCar race was quite entertaining, and Alex Palou, of course, got the dub. Not a surprise at all. The one big knock I would have also about the Truck Series going to St. Pete and the other two series going to Circuit of the Americas. Of course, most of you have seen it before when they do events like this, that they're going to have non-competitive pit stops, which is understandable. Some of these teams have full-fledged pit crews, but a good amount of these teams in the Craftsman Truck Series use the same crews, or at least a couple of members from crews, whether it's the NASCAR Cup Series or the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series. And with a lot of those pit crew members in Austin, Texas, it wouldn't have been fair for a lot of those teams that don't necessarily have full-time pit crews for their truck series organization. So I understand it, but at the same time, it is a little bit frustrating. I'm not a big fan of having the non-competitive pit stops. All right, let's now actually get to the race itself. There's a couple of things I do want to talk about with this Craftsman Truck Series race. The first thing I want to talk about is, of course, you have Dario Franchitti, James Hinchcliffe, and then you had Adam Andretti in another race. Adam Andretti unfortunately got involved in a wreck, but he was running really well. Adam Andretti has actually surprised me quite a bit. He's raced Trans Ams and not off-road cars, but road racing cars, I should say, for years. But I wouldn't say he has like all the starts in the world, but he has a decent amount of starts. He hasn't raced in a while. He impressed me with his speed in Atlanta. He obviously struggled with the handling, and he impressed me with his speed once again here at St. Pete. But like I said, had a demolished car, got involved in an incident with Christian Eckes, if I remember correctly, and it was a really tough day for Andretti. But I would like to see more of Adam Andretti. Actually, I would really like to see some more out of him in NASCAR. Maybe NASCAR was what Adam Andretti was supposed to do, because he seems like he's kind of a natural, in my opinion. I don't know if anybody shares the same opinion. Let me know your thoughts in the comments on Adam Andretti in the Truck Series. But let's move on to Dario and Hinchcliffe, because those are the two I really want to talk about. Jimmy Hinch and Dario Franchitti, they actually had a run-in at one point in the race. Dario apologized to James Hinchcliffe. Apparently, he owes Jimmy Hinch some dinner. Sounds like he's going to buy him dinner as an apology for taking him out, which it is what it is. They're both trying to figure it out. Dario Franchitti, I can't tell you, and I'll get to Hinch in a second, but Dario Franchitti, I cannot tell you how impressed I was on Dario's performance. He was running in the back half of the top 10 90% of this race, looked extremely competitive. And this is a guy who hasn't raced in a professional race in over 10 years. He had a road series race, I want to say maybe a couple months ago, a year ago, something like that, a GT3 race. And other than that, he's ran maybe 2 or 3 like non-professional sort of races, just like charity sort of racing, if you get what I'm saying. But for someone who hasn't raced in a professional race since I think 2013, it's been over 10 years since he's raced in a professional race. Let alone, I don't think he's ever raced a race in the Truck Series. He raced a couple of races in the Busch Series at the time. Obviously, he had his opportunity in the Cup Series, even raced the COT for Ganassi, and really struggled. He really struggled mightily when he came over to NASCAR the first time. So I'm going to be honest, I didn't have the highest expectations for him coming into this event. I knew he was driving a Tricon Garage truck. I knew Jimmy was going to help him out a lot, and the big advantage that he was going to get was the fact that he actually has experience at St. Pete, unlike a lot of other drivers that were in the field. But he just looked impressive. He put down some pretty decent laps in practice, the very few laps that he got, and he was phenomenal all race long. And he even said it in one of his interviews. He just kept on hitting the wall, and he ended up having to come down pit road and get repairs. He was struggling at the very end of this race because of his damaged race car. And also, if some of you saw, he was dealing with some shoulder pain. It looked like his shoulders were just getting extremely tired. He was pressing an ice pack, it looked like, up against it at one point. You could see him like squinting his eyes in pain. He clearly was in pain and just not used to that sort of driving and that sort of racing over that amount of time. But I'm just so impressed with Dario. I really would love to see more of Dario Franchitti in the Craftsman Truck Series. So impressive. Honestly, if he gets a couple of more starts in him, I truly think he could win a road course race in the Craftsman Truck Series. I don't know about an oval, per se. I would have to see him race an oval to really make my judgment on that. But a road course, for sure. And there's more road course races in the Craftsman Truck Series this season. I would love to see Dario Franchitti out there again this season. Just extremely impressive. He shows why he's a legend of the sport of motorsports in general. One of the greatest IndyCar series drivers of all time. And he just really showed his pure talent out there. And but yeah, by the end of the race, his car was about done. His body was giving up on him. And he still pushed through and finished the end of the race. Just unfortunately didn't get the finish that he quite wanted or probably deserved. But it looked like he had a great time, a great day overall for Dario Franchitti. He seemed very happy right after the race. He was so tired. He went to go sat against the pit box, and that's where he ended up getting his post-race interview. Just phenomenal job by Dario Franchitti. Great job. But let me know your thoughts in the comments about Dario Franchitti's performance. And let's get to now Jimmy Hinch, James Hinchcliffe, because I would say he impressed me about as much as Dario Franchitti. Maybe even a little bit more. The reason I say that, because first of all, Jimmy Hinch was pretty much on Dario's ass all race. They were within a couple of positions of each other pretty much all race. Dario, I'd say, was in front of Jimmy Hinch more often than not throughout the event. And obviously, they had their contact, and I think turn one, right when you get off of the airstrip. And I'm so impressed. But the reason why I'd say I am so impressed, Dario actually has a little bit of experience in NASCARs and stock cars. James Hinchcliffe hasn't raced in NASCAR ever. This was his first start in NASCAR. And no offense to James Hinchcliffe. James Hinchcliffe is a very good driver in his own right, but I wouldn't consider him like one of the legends of the sport, one of the GOATs of the IndyCar series. I wouldn't put him on that upper echelon. He was a very good driver, definitely wasn't a bad driver, but I didn't have look at my expectations for Dario Franchitti. My expectations for James Hinchcliffe were even lower than Dario Franchitti. And for Hinch to go out there and run top 10 all race, came back from wrecking twice, I think. He ended up spinning out twice. Ended up driving back up to the front to get a top 10 finish in his NASCAR debut. That is amazing. That is fantastic. What a freaking performance from Jimmy Hinch. And I would love to see more of Jimmy Hinch, a.k.a. James Hinchcliffe, Hinchtown, the mayor. I would love to see more of him as well. I didn't go into this event expecting to say that after the event. I was just like, I'm glad these guys, going into the event, I'm glad that these guys are showing up. It's really good for the sport to get drivers like James Hinchcliffe, Dario Franchitti, and Adam Andretti. It's always great to have an Andretti in the field. Mario Andretti was at the race, by the way, as well, which is freaking awesome. I'm really happy that Mario Andretti was there as well, which is just badass to have him there. All that, I was like, this is really great for the sport of NASCAR. This is awesome for the sport, and this is really fun. This is really fun. But it ended up being more than that. They ended up being very competitive, and I would love to see more of them. I would just love to see more of those three drivers, because I think they all have potential to get a win in the Truck Series. I don't know about the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series. I don't know about the NASCAR Cup Series, but I can truly see Adam Andretti, James Hinchcliffe, and Dario Franchitti, as long as they get some more laps in, get some more practice. And Dario, obviously, I think needs to prepare. And Dario's over 50 years old, but might need to prepare his body a little bit more. And if they do those things, I could see any one of them potentially winning a Truck Series race on a road course, which would be fantastic. It would be fantastic not just for them, but for the sport of NASCAR and for just overall motorsports, because I would love to see drivers cross over into other worlds. I think a lot of drivers end up crossing over into NASCAR. I would love to see more NASCAR drivers cross over into other series. I just want to see more of that. I would love to see more of that. Like, I would like to see a lot more of the supercars drivers come over to America and maybe take their hand at IndyCar or take their hand at NASCAR. Same thing with IndyCar drivers. I just want everybody to be more well-rounded. I feel like a lot of drivers are very scared to step into a car that they have no knowledge of. And the balls it took from James Hinchcliffe, Adam Andretti, and Dario Franchitti, Adam Andretti the last 2 races, but the balls it took for those drivers, those men to come over to our sport, a sport where they either have very little experience or no experience at all and do as well as they did. That is freaking awesome. That is awesome. It makes me so happy to see, and I want to see more of those 3 drivers. So let me know your thoughts in the comments on Jimmy Hinch. Let me know your thoughts in the comments on Dario Franchitti. And then, of course, let me know your thoughts in the comments on Adam Andretti. And also, let me know if you want to see some more crossovers with other motorsports. What is your dream driver to come over to NASCAR and attempt to race? For me, anybody that knows me, the driver I would kill to see at least attempt or make a race in NASCAR is Daniel Ricciardo, one of my all-time favorite motorsports drivers. I would love. And he has a big passion for NASCAR. I would love to see him come over here and take a crack at it. But let me know your thoughts in the comments. All right, I was very impressed by those motorsports legends on what they were able to do. But let's move on to potentially a future legend of NASCAR, Landen Lewis. I do want to say a couple of things about Landen Lewis because anybody that's watched me, I have mentioned Landen Lewis a decent amount, but I've put him behind Zilisch. I've put him behind Brent Cruz, and we'll talk about both Connor Zilisch and Brent Cruz in a little bit when we get to the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series and the NASCAR Cup Series races. But I've been pretty high on Landen Lewis as well. If you have someone like Ron Hornaday saying great things about you and being a mentor for you, I think Kevin Harvick has went out and said some great things about Landen Lewis as well. I want to say Landen Lewis is actually part of Kevin Harvick's management company, but don't quote me on that. I'm just so impressed by Landen. Landen Lewis raced his ass off. He raced his ass off. He has such a bright future in this sport, and I wouldn't consider him really even a road course guy. But it being a new racetrack on the schedule that no one really knows, obviously, I was about to say Danny Rick. Obviously, Dario, obviously Jimmy Hinch, they have had some experience there, but in a completely different race car. Landen Lewis, this race was going to come down to who is just the best driver. Riggs ended up taking it, and we'll talk about Riggs in a second. But Landen Lewis was strutting his stuff all race long, driving through the field, making a bunch of passes in that Nice Motorsports number 45. And I really wanted to talk about him because he's just somebody we need to watch out for. As a NASCAR fan, he's someone we need to watch out for. He's one of the future stars of this sport. Like, obviously, you have Connor Zilisch, you have Corey Heim, you have Brent Cruz, you have Jesse Love, and you have Landen Lewis. Landen Lewis is another guy you have to watch out for in the future. He's going to be in the Cup Series one day. He's probably going to have a full-time Truck Series or O'Reilly Auto Parts Series ride next season. He's someone we really need to keep a very, very close eye on because he has so much raw talent, so much raw ability. And then unlike Corey Day, and we will talk about Corey Day, I don't think Landen Lewis is too rough around the edges. I think for the age that he is, he has a very surprisingly high racing IQ, very similar to Connor. Connor Zilisch, in my opinion, already has one of the highest racing IQs in NASCAR, I would say. Maybe not top 5, maybe not even top 10, but for Zilisch only being 19, I'd say his racing IQ, his smarts inside the car is pretty freaking high. And I would say the same thing for Landen Lewis. For someone his age, I think his racing IQ is pretty freaking high, and I think he has all the potential in the world to be one of the best drivers in NASCAR, and he just really impressed me. I thought Landen was going to do pretty decent, but for him to run top 5, top 10 all race long, that is pretty freaking fantastic, if I had to say so myself. But let me know your thoughts in the comments. How do you feel about Landen Lewis and his potential future in NASCAR? All right, let's get down to our winner and our almost winner. I want to talk about the almost winner first and what could have been for Ty Majeski. Ty Majeski, with around 20 laps to go, had the race lead, ended up overdriving the final corner, coming to, I think, either 19 or 18 laps to go, something like that. Right around 20 laps to go, ended up overdriving the corner and and lost a lot of spots, lost a bunch of spots from the race lead. And Majeski looked like he might have had the best car. I'm not sure if he was the fastest. His teammate Ben Rhodes was very strong all race long as well. But Majeski at the end of this race was the fastest truck. He was driving down Lane Riggs and just ran out of time. If he didn't make this mistake in the final corner, if he didn't make any mistakes at the end of this race, Ty Majeski probably would have went to victory lane in the first ever Truck Series race at St. Pete. And he's just going to be saying what if for a while. And Ty Majeski, a very talented race car driver, in my opinion, probably the best short track racer in the country and one of the best road course racers in the Craftsman Truck Series, especially now with Corey Heim gone. Corey Heim was leaps and bounds above everybody else. But now with him gone, I think there's an argument to be made that Ty Majeski is the best Craftsman Truck Series driver, period, but especially at road courses. And I think he would have won. It's a fatal error. He was probably kicking himself hard after that, and he was kicking himself after the race because he could almost reach out and grab Lane Riggs. He was so close. He tried to even send it in the last corner, it looked like, and he just couldn't quite get to his bumper. Just very unfortunate for Majeski, not able to get that first win in the number 88 that Matt Crafton made so legendary. I'm still getting used to seeing Majeski in that Menards number 88 because they didn't really change the paint scheme. It's kind of weird because I think Crafton drove that 88 till started driving it in 98 or 99. He's the whole 21st century. Matt Crafton has been driving that number 88 Menards machine, whether it was a Ford, whether it was a Chevrolet, whether it was a Toyota. So that's a little weird to me still. I'm beginning to finally get used to it. But Majeski had his opportunity to put his stamp on that number, on that truck for the first time, and just couldn't get the job done. And I think he has a great chance at Phoenix. He's not right. Well, actually, no, the trucks don't go to Phoenix. I think that's a shame, by the way. The trucks aren't going to Phoenix or Vegas. I think that's a very missed opportunity. Personally, Phoenix makes sense because of the IndyCar series, but not Vegas. Anyways, Majeski just couldn't get the job done. Maybe if there was one more lap, just one more lap, I don't know if Majeski would have won, but we would have had a hell of a battle. But let me know your thoughts about Majeski in those closing laps. All right, let's get to our winner, Lane Riggs. Lane Riggs has won a good amount of races at this point in the Craftsman Truck Series. And other than that first win when he knocked out his shoulder, and that's where I became a fan of Lane Riggs because I've dislocated my shoulder. I've had many shoulder surgeries. And also because his dad is Scott Riggs. I actually saw Scott Riggs at Phoenix Raceway. Was it last year? Might have been last year. Might have been the year before. And I liked Scott Riggs growing up. He wasn't one of my favorite drivers, but I liked Scott Riggs. So naturally, I supported Lane Riggs. And Lane Riggs is one of those up-and-coming talents. He's like the Corey Heims, the Connor Ziliches, the Brent Cruz. I think he's the future of the sport, I would say, and potentially is ready for a Cup Series ride or at least an O'Reilly Auto Parts Series ride. But as I was saying, I don't think I've seen Riggs that excited at the end of the race besides his first career win, which I think was a Gateway. Other than that, I don't think I've seen him so excited to win a race. Pretty much every single corner, he burnt it down. He jumped out of the car and he was pumped. He was hyped to win. And I think the main reason I think there's two reasons why. Maybe even three. There's three reasons, actually. There's probably three reasons why. First of all, this was the inaugural event. This is an inaugural event. It's the first time the Craftsman Truck Series ever went to the streets of St. Petersburg, St. Pete. Winning an inaugural event is always special because you're the first to ever do it. You're the first to ever do it. Maybe even the last. Who knows if the Truck Series ever go back to St. Pete. I think with how great the race was and how everything went for the overall doubleheader weekend, a star-studded weekend, I would say, I think they will go back next year, but that's just my early prediction. Maybe even add the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series next year. I'm not sure. But it was a great weekend. overall. So I would be surprised if the trucks don't go back again next year. So on that front, it's awesome, and that's probably why he was hyped. A second reason was the eyes that were on that race because of Adam Andretti being in the event, the eyes on that race because of Dario Franchitti being in the event, the eyes on that race because James Hinchcliffe, the mayor, Hinchtown, he has a bunch of nicknames, were also was in that event. So there was a whole bunch of eyes on this event. And then the third reason is kind of similar to the second reason. You had legends of motorsport because you didn't just have James Hinchcliffe, you didn't just have Dario Franchitti, you didn't just have Adam Andretti, but you also had Mario Andretti in attendance at the racetrack. You had Jimmy Johnson at the racetrack. You had all these legends of motorsport also at the racetrack watching. So that had to feel really cool for him too. He's like that would be honestly one of my first thoughts, like dead ass. Like right when I crossed the start finish line, I would be like, oh shit, Mario Andretti just watched me win a race. Mario Andretti knows I exist. Like that would be one of my first thoughts if I won that race, if I was in Lane Riggs' shoes. So that's awesome for Lane. I'm happy for Lane. Lane has such a bright future in this sport. He's one of the best younger drivers in our sport right now. And for him to just go out there and get another win in the fashion that he did. What a start for Front Row Motorsports in the Truck Series, by the way. Chandler Smith ran great all race long. Lane Riggs and Chandler Smith had a great battle between themselves as well. But just what a moment. What a moment for Lane Riggs. Can't help but be happy for the guy. And he burnt it down in pretty much every corner. That was really awesome. I'm surprised. Well, he might have torn his tire. I actually forget if he lost his tire. Let me know in the comments if he did. And he just burnt it down in pretty much every single corner. That was freaking awesome. But let me know your thoughts in the comments on Lane Riggs winning the inaugural Truck Series race, the Only Bulls 250 at St. Pete. All right, now that we're done with the Craftsman Truck Series and the events over there, let's move on to the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series at Circuit of the Americas. Let's talk about another one of these young, up-and-coming NASCAR superstars, and that is Brent Cruz. Brent Cruz, I don't know if a lot of people know a lot about Brent Cruz. I think if you're a diehard NASCAR fan, you have heard about Brent Cruz for sure over the last year and a half. Maybe even I've been not necessarily watching Brent Cruz super closely. Not like I was watching Zilisch. I've been following Zilisch since he was 16. I knew he was going to be a superstar, and hasn't had the strongest start in the Cup Series season, but he showed a lot of speed in the COTA race today, and I'll talk about Zilisch in both races here in a second. But a lot of people were pointing at Brent Cruz as being probably Zilisch's biggest competition once they get a little bit older, as being the futures of the sport. Like a lot of people expect, and me, I'm included in this. I expect Brent Cruz and Connor Zilisch to be competing for championships against one another at some point in the NASCAR Cup Series. And Brent Cruz, I think some people were pointing at him at getting maybe a top 5, top 10. I think some people were probably like, the kid's going to struggle no matter how talented he is. He's not used to these cars. He's going to struggle. And Brent Cruz is actually going to be racing the remainder of the races on the season because he is turning 18 here very, very soon. And next week at Phoenix, he's able to race it. So he's going to be competing for a championship in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series this year. I think there was some confusion about that. He is competing for a championship, even though he missed the first 2 races. He wasn't eligible because of his age. Like he's 17 and he can race at most circuits, but not at certain circuits like in Atlanta, like a Daytona. He's going to compete for the championship for sure. And he went out there and ran top 5, top 10 all race long, led a couple laps actually. I think I read a stat where he's the youngest driver since Casey Atwood in I think 1998 to lead laps in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series, which is a fantastic stat. So great for Brent Cruz, and that just builds his stock even more. And him racing in a JGR, Joe Gibbs Racing car. And I think some people have pointed at Joe Gibbs Racing struggling in the O'Reilly Auto Parts series. And this is nothing against necessarily the drivers they already have over there, but I don't think any of the drivers that they currently have on the O'Reilly Auto Parts series roster are just like these fantastic drivers or fantastic potential. Like Brandon Jones, he's been there for a number of years, and I think he's maybe a step, maybe even 2 steps below Justin Allgaier, but I look at him as a O'Reilly Auto Parts series driver for life. That's why I kind of compared him to Allgaier, because I think Allgaier is pretty much at this point. I think Allgaier should get his chance at Cup, but at this point, I don't think that's going to happen. Nor does he maybe not want to race full-time Cup. But those two are O'Reilly Auto Parts series drivers for life. You have Taylor Gray, who's definitely shown some flashes. I think Taylor Gray is probably the best out of the 3. I think Taylor Gray has shown a lot of flashes and a lot of potential, but definitely struggles at times. And William Sawalich, in my opinion, has been kind of a disappointment. Obviously, at the end of last year, he picked it up quite a bit, and we're just starting off the year, so I don't want to get too ahead of myself, and he did get a top 10 at COTA, so maybe he's able to figure it out. But Sawalich looked super strong in ARCA. I thought he was going to come into the O'Reilly Auto Parts series and just start kicking ass immediately, and he really hasn't done that so far. Like I said, a little bit of a disappointment, but he can definitely still turn it around. But Brent Cruz, I would say, is already the best driver at that race team. That's just flat out. No, not holding anything back on that take. Brent Cruz is already the best driver at Joe Gibbs Racing in the O'Reilly Auto Parts series. He's already the best. He's already the best on that race team. He's going to win races. You need to keep an eye on Brent Cruz. He is going to win races. I don't know how many races he's going to win this year, but he's going to win multiple races this year. Whether that's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, like, he's going to win races. So watch out for Brent Cruz. What a performance. Led, I think, 5 laps at COTA, which isn't a lot, but he took the lead from Zilisch and SVG on a restart. Just very impressive. Very impressive from Brent Cruz. But let me know your thoughts in the comments and your opinion on Brent Cruz. All right, let's get to possibly the biggest story from the O'Reilly Auto Parts series in COTA, and that was Connor Zilisch and Corey Day. I did see the post-race interviews. Corey Day, I think, started off his interview pretty bad, and I think he figured it out by the end of it that he, like, hey, you might need to apologize, you might need to do something. Because Corey Day, I think Corey Day has a bunch of talent. I think he has a bunch of raw talent, and I talked about him last week on Car in the Hauler because of everything that he did in Atlanta. I think the kid is extremely talented, and he had a great finish. I think he ended up getting 5th, had a great finish at COTA, just a great overall race when it comes to speed-wise, but he flat out took out Connor Zilisch. He tried to blame it on the car in his interview, and look at Sheldon Creed, and I'll talk about Sheldon Creed in a second, but Sheldon Creed had no power steering, and he drove it all the way up to 11th, and he didn't take out anybody along the way. So I don't think that's a very valid excuse. If you're a good enough driver, you shouldn't be wrecking people, especially the way he did. I don't think you could blame the car for the way he wrecked Zilisch. Some of you that didn't see it, pretty much coming into the S's at COTA, he just came all the way up, like Zilisch wasn't even there. He came all the way up like Zilisch wasn't even there, and he came out all the way up to the rumble strip and just flat out hit Zilisch in the quarter panel, spun him around. Zilisch immediately came over the radio like, fucking Corey Day, dude. I think that's what he said. And just, Corey Day really needs to figure it out. He needs to figure it out. Because he's making enemies. He's making a lot of enemies out there, and I know he's not trying to do it on purpose, and and I'm glad the way he finished his interview. I also saw the tweet that he made. I really appreciated that tweet and him at least taking some sort of accountability, unlike Atlanta. Like, I got really pissed when he took out the Junior Motorsports cars, and he's like, oh, I lost a tire, when he might have lost a tire after the wreck, but it was very clear that he didn't lose a tire going into the corner. He just screwed up. You just need to take some accountability. So the fact that he took some accountability is a step in the right direction, but I look at him as a least, not as quick. Let me rephrase. Not as quick version of Carson Hocevar. Like is Carson Hocevar going out there trying to wreck people, trying to do all that shit? No, I would say most of the time he's not. He's not trying to wreck people. He's not trying to piss people off, but he does. That's what he does. And Corey Day is doing that as well, but I think he just really needs to figure it out. He doesn't know how these cars quite work yet. And I think we've seen this out of a lot of dirt drivers that have came over to the sport, and I talked about it last week, so I'm not going to go over it too much. But Larson went through a lot of issues when he came here. A lot of people that remember when Larson first came to NASCAR, he struggled pretty hard in the Nationwide Series at the time. He struggled pretty hard. He wrecked a bunch of cars, whether it was his own or somebody else's car. And he did it at Ganassi in the Cup Series as well. Just didn't know when to go 120% and didn't know when to go 80%. And I think that's just the mindset from dirt racing, because dirt racing, very short races, everybody's going 120%, 100% at the time. You're going as hard as you can, as fast as you can, every single lap in dirt racing. When in NASCAR, that's not what you necessarily want to do. If you do that, you're going to kill your tires. If you do that, you're going to potentially run somebody over, run somebody into the wall, do something that you probably shouldn't do, and you're going to make some sort of enemy out of something that was probably completely avoidable. And that's how it was with this Zilisch wreck. It was completely avoidable, and he flat out wrecked Zilisch. It wasn't intentional, but he wrecked him. He flat out wrecked Zilisch, cost Zilisch potentially any shot of winning that race, because I thought we were going to see SVG versus Zilisch just banging heads all race long, and we saw a little bit of that in the first stage. But other than the first stage, we didn't really see too much of Zilisch versus SVG, and SVG ended up winning the race. And we will talk about Shane a little bit here in a second. But just Day needs to figure it out. And the fact that he took some accountability, maybe not the way that I would like for him to do, because he did try to, initially, he did try to point blame at the car, but I think he realized during the interview and maybe seeing the comments online, he's like, hopefully he had a change of heart and a change of mind. He was like, he probably looked in the mirror at himself and was like, man, is everybody really this mad at me? Because he's been getting shit the last couple of weeks, and he got some shit last year in a couple of races that he ran as well. So hopefully he's figured it out, because if he can clean up those edges, I do think Corey Day can be a big-time talent. There has to be a reason why Rick Hendrick and Hendrick Motorsports put everything behind him. And I think partially that is because I kind of look at Corey Day's relationship with Kyle Larson very, very similar to the way I look at the relationship of Jimmy Johnson and Jeff Gordon. Jimmy Johnson ended up going to Hendrick Motorsports purely because Jeff Gordon saw something in him. And that's how I look at Corey Day as well. Corey Day is at Hendrick Motorsports, not purely, but mainly because of what Kyle Larson sees in Corey Day. And I see it too. I've seen him race dirt. He's one of the best dirt racers in the world, arguably. But he needs to figure it out. He needs to clean up those edges. And if he can clean up those edges, I think he's going to be very competitive. And I think there's plenty of time to still turn it around this season. And he could potentially compete for the championship this year in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series. But let me know your thoughts in the comments on the incident between Connor Zilisch and Corey Day. That was a mouthful right there. Right before we get to Shane Van Gisbergen, I do want to really quickly go through this. Sheldon Creed, fresh off his win at Atlanta, put on a hell of a performance. He lost power steering in the final stage, and it looked like that he was probably going to get a bad finish, because at the time, I think he was 19th or 20th. He was running around 20th at the time, and he ended up driving all the way up to 11th. I had to at least bring him up for a moment here, because that is insane. Most drivers that end up losing power steering end up just falling like a brick, falling like a rock to the back of the field. And the fact that Sheldon was almost able to drive up and get a top 10 because of, even after, him losing power steering, that's insane. That is insane. And I think some people will look at it as like, oh, power steering isn't a big deal. Like some of the older people that have been watching NASCAR for a very long time, it's like, oh, losing power steering, it makes it a little bit more difficult, but not that much more difficult. Well, me personally, obviously, I have never raced in NASCAR. I've never raced a stock car, so I can only listen to what the drivers say. But from everything I have heard and all the research I have done when it comes to that, back in the day, early 2000s, 90s, 80s, all back then, losing power steering was still a pretty big deal, and it still really affected you and your race car, but it's way more difficult now from what I know, from what I've heard from drivers, that nowadays in NASCAR, whether it's the Truck Series, the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series, or the Cup Series, you losing power steering is much more severe, much more of a punishment than it was ever before. So the fact that Sheldon was able to come back and almost get a top 10 is very impressive, and I would almost count it. That's a win. Like, that's a win in my book. That's insane. That is insane. And Creed, if he didn't lose power steering, if he didn't have the issues that he had throughout the day, Sheldon Creed, I think, could have been up there competing with SVG. Do I think he would have beat SVG? No, but I think he probably would have gotten the top 3. I think him and Sam Mayer, his teammate, had some issues near the end of the race as well. But I felt like those 3 plus Zilisch were the class of the field. You had the 2 Junior Motorsports guys and the 2 Haas Factory Team guys, and I felt like those were the class of the field. So Sheldon getting 11th after losing power steering is really impressive. But let me know your thoughts in the comments. All right, now that I've gone through all of that, let's get to our winner, Shane Van Gisbergen, SVG, or as Joey Logano would call him, Hamburger. Hell of a performance. I love this guy. Anybody that knows me, I freaking love Shane Van Gisbergen, the Kiwi from Supercars. I love his story. I really just love everything about him. I love his attitude probably more than anything. He's just always in a good mood. He just seems so hyped up and electric to just learn. He's just having fun. He's out there having the time of his life. He knows that he's a race car driver and that he's lucky to be a race car driver. So I'm always a big fan of Shane. I always like seeing him win. He's just really fun. He's a really fun guy to watch, whether it's on the racetrack or off of the racetrack, and he just always shows his talent. And he showed his talent at COTA once again. Just put on a show. Was the best car. He was the fastest all race long. Probably had the best looking race car out there too. That Safety Culture number 9 and the Safety Culture 97 for the Cup race were both just beautiful, beautiful paint schemes. And he just ran his ass off. Just a fantastic race from Shane Van Gisbergen. No one really had anything for SVG in this race other than the drivers I mentioned, like Sam Mayer, Sheldon Creed, and Connor Zilisch. I think one of those guys potentially could have at least put the pressure on SVG. Would SVG made a mistake? Probably not. But at least maybe put a little pressure on Shane. And obviously all of them had certain issues throughout the day, so it didn't end up turning that way for any of them. So Shane ended up winning the race. The one knock I have on Shane is that he didn't punt the rugby ball over the fence. I don't know if anybody was watching, but if you saw like I did, but right when I used to play goalkeeper, so I know that look. I used to play goalkeeper in soccer for years, so I know that look when I make a bad punt. Like I immediately just give a certain look. And right when he punted that ball, I'm like, yep, that's not making it over. And he was staring down the ball the whole time, and it didn't make it over. Like, I just personally thought that was really funny, being a goalkeeper and being a guy that's punted many balls in my life. To see that, that geeked me out. I thought that was pretty funny that he didn't punt it over. I'm very curious on what they did with that ball as well. Did they just leave it on the track and never get it? Did another Trackhouse guy grab it, maybe throw it over the fence? Did SVG wait until everything was done and cooled down and then grab the ball and try to punt it again? I don't know. I'm not sure exactly what they ended up doing with that rugby ball. But nonetheless, Shane Van Gisbergen gets another win. Gets a win in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series this time at Circuit of the Americas, which I would say has probably been his worst road course out of the bunch, which doesn't say much because he's still the best He's still the best, but I would say it's probably been his worst road course in NASCAR so far has been COTA. But gets the job done once again. Great celebration. The whole team was hyped for him. It's always great seeing Shane Van Gisbergen win. I don't think everybody's going to hold that same opinion because I think some people are very tired of him winning at road courses. But I love the guy's attitude. I love his passion for not just NASCAR, but just motorsports and racing. I just love him. He's a fan favorite at this point, I would say, for a reason. But let me know your thoughts in the comments on another SVG win at a road course, but this time in the O'Reilly Series at COTA. Right now that we've gone through the Craftsman Truck Series, now that we've gone through the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series, let's move on to the main event, the NASCAR Cup Series, the Duramax Grand Prix at Circuit of the Americas. There's a couple of drivers that I think just put on phenomenal performances today, and I think one that I was extremely impressed and very, very surprised about was Ryan Blaney. Ryan Blaney, I think, is one of the most talented drivers in the Cup Series. He has a Cup Series championship. He's very consistent. He stays out of trouble. He does everything you want him to really do as a NASCAR driver. And I think the change in the playoff format now back to the chase, I think it's going to be huge for Ryan Blaney. And I think that's a big plus for Ryan Blaney. I think it's the opposite for his teammate Joey Logano. Joey Logano is more successful in the past format we had, but this format rewards consistency. And I would say Ryan Blaney is one of the most consistent drivers in the Cup Series, up there with like Chase Elliott. I think those two are extremely consistent and tend to stay out of trouble. But Ryan Blaney, he's not a road course guy. I mean, he's not like shit. He's not like Brad. No offense to Brad. Brad's a great driver, but he's horrible on road courses. I'm surprised he actually stayed out there all day. Give it up for Brad actually staying out there all day. Had Joey Hand on top of the box, but didn't need him. Had the pimp walk walking in. He had the pimp walk walking out. So I have to respect that. Staying in your race car and pushing through the pain that he probably had in that race car today. But back to Blaney, I don't think Blaney's not much of a road course guy. If you asked me, where do you think Ryan Blaney, before the weekend started, where do you think Ryan Blaney's going to finish? I would have said 13th, 14th, something like that. He's not a bad road course racer, but he's not upper echelon at the road courses. And he was great all day. I think he was probably the best car throughout the race, maybe even the best car, period. Just led a whole bunch of laps, just looked extremely strong. At one point, he had like a 7-second advantage on second place, and SVG was in third, and he ended up having like a 10-second advantage on Shane Van Gisbergen on a road course. Definitely didn't have that on my bingo card. I know Blaney won at the Roval years ago when Jimmy Johnson and Martin Truex Jr. wrecked each other in the inaugural race at the Roval. That was a huge moment, a huge highlight moment, and why one of the reasons why the Roval was so popular for a couple of years there. And so I know he can maybe get the job done, but I didn't think he was going to be that competitive. I really didn't. I think there's an argument to be made that he was the best driver in the field today. I think he struggled a little bit more on the longer runs compared to Reddick or SVG or some of these other drivers, because once they'd get further and further in the run, you get a little bit slower. And I think one thing that was probably a problem as well, and let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree, but something we see a lot in NASCAR, a driver that's dominating the whole race long, him and his race team tend to not do as many adjustments throughout the race because they're leading the race. They don't want to risk screwing up their car, so they might do a little bit here, a little bit there, but not make big wholesale changes to the car throughout the race. And a lot of these other drivers were probably making adjustments throughout the race, and I feel like this is probably what happened. I feel like him and his team got behind on adjustments, and just everybody else got better throughout the day, and eventually some of them ended up getting in front of Blaney. But Blaney, very impressive. Very impressive. I didn't expect Blaney to be as strong as he was today and put on a hell of a performance, and he has to be very proud about his performance because he's not a road course guy. He's not a road course guy. Like, if he gets a top 10, I would consider that being a very, very good race for Blaney. And arguably, he had the best car today. Just didn't finish with the best car, if that makes any sense. Like 60 or 70% of the day, Ryan Blaney was the fastest. Ryan Blaney was the best car throughout a good portion of this race. Even when he was behind Reddick, he was constantly right on Reddick's ass. He even came over the radio and was like, I just can't get past this guy. And Blaney was faster than Reddick, I think, at that time, but just couldn't make the pass cleanly. And Blaney's a respectful driver. Maybe not respectful on the radio, but he's very respectful on the racetrack. Just a very impressive performance from Ryan fucking Blaney out there today. But let me know your thoughts in the comments. How did you feel about Ryan Blaney's performance at COTA? All right, let's move on to Connor Zilisch, the Zilbillies. I love that nickname for the Zilisch fans. I forget where I heard that, but Zilbillies, that's a dope-ass nickname. And I was wearing my 87 hat throughout most of the race. Obviously, he made his first career Cup Series start at COTA, Circuit of the Americas, last year. I was actually at the race last year. And he struggled for the most part in that race last year, in practice, in qualifying, in that race last year. But in the last 20, 30 laps, he was putting down some of the fastest laps on the racetrack in last year's event. And this year, once again, just kind of struggled in qualifying, qualified outside the top 20. But once the green flag dropped, he was one of the faster drivers on the racetrack, especially at the end of this race. At the end of this race, before he got spun out the second time, he was putting down a blistering pace. He was by far the quickest driver in the racetrack, at times running over a half a second quicker than the entire field when they were all pretty much on equal tires. But just to go through Zilich's story for the day, he started outside the top 20. He drove up to 7th, ended up gaining some spots on pit road at the end of the stage, ended up getting spun around by Daniel Suarez. And I'm a huge fan of Daniel Suarez. He's one of my favorite drivers. But I don't know what he's doing. I don't know if he's intentionally trying to get back at Trackhouse or not, or if it's just coincidence. I would assume it's just coincidence. I don't think he's going out just wrecking these drivers. But if you have your tinfoil hat on, you can maybe look at it that way, that he's trying to take out his old race team. Because I've heard some of his interviews. He clearly wanted to stay at Trackhouse. He clearly didn't want to leave. He felt like Trackhouse was home to him, but you only have so many spots on a race team. And who do you want, Connor Zilisch or Daniel Suarez? You clearly want Connor Zilisch. Nothing against Daniel Suarez, but Connor Zilisch is by far the best young talent in our sport right now. But Zilisch ended up getting spun out by Suarez. I don't know how anybody didn't level that number 88 car going through that corner. Austin Dillon almost hit him. There was a couple of drivers that almost hit him. Very surprising. Ended up going to the back, drove all the way back up to the top 10. And on another restart, they showed the overhead view in turn 1, and I'm watching Zilisch, and Zilisch is clearly almost having PTSD in that moment. He goes all the way to the high side. He's by far the highest up the track than anybody, and he still gets wrecked. Denny Hamlin gets in there, I think 4 wide, I forget who he ended up getting into, but that person ends up getting into Zane Smith, and Zane Smith ends up clearing out Zilisch. Not Zane Smith's fault at all. That one was on Denny Hamlin on that wreck. But I just felt horrible for Zilisch. And then he ended up driving through the field again, ended up getting a 14th place finish somehow. He started outside the top 20, drove up to the top 10, got wrecked, fell to the back, drove back up to the top 10, got wrecked, drove back up to finish 14th. He might have been the best car. Arguably, he was potentially the fastest driver in the field, at times running way faster than the rest of the field, running a half second to maybe even almost a full second at times faster than the entire field. Just a hell of a performance. Maybe if he never got a chance to go up there and compete with the leaders. I think if he did, I think he would have had a great chance. I think he would have had a great chance to take down Reddick. I don't know if he would have or he wouldn't, but he would have had a fantastic opportunity to get his first career win in the NASCAR Cup Series today. And sometimes that's just not how it works out. That's just not how it works out. I'm very interested to see how Zilisch does at Phoenix, how he does at Vegas. Very interested to see how he does at those two racetracks upcoming. But what could have been? What could have been for Zilisch? What could have been for the Zillbillies? But let me know your thoughts in the comments on Connor Zilich's performance at COTA. Before we get to the end of this race with Shane Van Gisbergen and Tyler Reddick, and Reddick winning 3 in a row, 3-peat, pulling his best Michael Jordan. I know some of y'all saw the picture where he's copying, paying homage, I guess, to Michael Jordan's famous picture holding the championship trophy after winning 3 straight NBA finals. But before we get to that, I do quickly want to talk about the cool suit situation that we saw today. I think we've seen this a bunch at some of these hot races, especially over the last couple of years. We've seen a lot of cool suit failures. I think there was probably more than 2 cool suit failures today, but there's 2 that were very notable. Alex Bowman was very uncomfortable, was feeling sick in the race car, and Myatt Snider proves why, if you're a race car driver, you should always bring a race suit and a helmet to the racetrack, because he had his treetop race suit, he had his helmet all prepared, he was playing spotter, if you will, at the race today, helping out. It seemed like he was helping out Fox. That's what it sounded like. He was helping out Fox. Even sent some, once he heard he might be getting into the 48 car, sent some text messages to Brad Perez, sent him some text messages back and forth asking him, like, hey, where's the breaking point in 6A? Well, how do I do this? How do I do that? Because Brad Perez just ran the track the day before in the O'Reilly Auto Parts series, and those two are very close. They're part of a certain group, if you will, a certain clique, I guess you could call them. So that was pretty cool to see those text messages, and just to see Myatt get in the car. I think Myatt is a very good race car driver. I think there is potential there. And to see him get in the 48 car, even though obviously he wasn't competing for anything, he was just helping out Hendrick Motorsports. That was a great moment for Myatt Snider. But at the same time, having that cool suit fail for Bowman. And on the first hot race of the year, it was pretty hot in Texas. I want to say it was roughly around 85 degrees throughout a good portion of the race. There's some humidity, not a whole bunch like the Carolinas or Florida, but there was still a decent amount of humidity out there today. The first hot race of the year tends to be the hardest race of the year to deal with heat, because you just came out of winter, came out of all this cold weather. You haven't dealt with heat weather probably since October or September. So to come out in that first hot race, whether it wasn't extremely hot, but still nonetheless pretty hot out there today, to deal with the cool suit failure is horrible. And AJ, I'll talk about AJ here in a second, but to deal with the cool suit failure is horrible, because once that cool suit fails, it's pushing cold water through your suit. Once it fails, it's hot water. That water heats up in your cool suit. So it makes it way worse. It makes it way worse than it needs to be. Me personally, if I was ever a race car driver, I would never, ever wear a cool suit. That's just me personally. I know the cool suit is a big help, and I know most of the cool suit's not going to... I think I saw somebody say, oh, cool suits fail 50% of the time. It's 50-50 on the cool suits, and it's like, I wouldn't go that far. The cool suit definitely fails a decent amount, but it's definitely not 50-50. I would say 1 out of every 10 or 1 out of every 8 or 9 times, something like that, the cool suit ends up failing. And I just wouldn't want that, because once that cool suit fails, you might be fucked. You might be screwed for the remainder of the race, the remainder of the event, and it's just going to be an extremely difficult and uncomfortable drive for you. And Bowman just couldn't take it anymore, got out of the race car. Bowman wasn't doing the best today, surprisingly, either. COTA is one of his better racetracks. I was very surprised he wasn't doing as strong as he was, and potentially that was possibly because of him just being so uncomfortable with the cool suit not being a cool suit. It was more like a hot suit, a heat suit, a sweatsuit, if you will. And yeah, he had to end up climbing out of the car. Now let's move on to Dinger, because AJ Allmendinger had a little bit of a scary moment because he got I don't know if there was any video per se of right when he got out of the race car, but Fox panned to his race car at while they were interviewing SVG on the front straightaway for a quick second or two, and then came back again for another quick second or two, like 10 or 20 seconds later. But they quickly panned to the 16 car, and AJ Allmendinger was just laying on the ground with people around him, just standing around him. So that was very scary. And then a crowd began to build around him with safety people from NASCAR. So that was a very scary moment just to see on TV and not really get any of the background to that. So it was a little bit more promising a couple minutes later because he did get taken off on a stretcher, which most people will say, oh, it's not very promising, but he was sitting up. He looked to be coherent. So I personally thought in that moment that he just was so extremely dehydrated. He just needed some fluids. And some of you may have saw his picture on social media saying, yeah, I'm good. And he had his arm bandaged to where he probably got some sort of IV, some sort of fluids pushed into his system because he was just extremely dehydrated because he had two issues. He had his cool suit fail. His cool suit failed, so it was just pushing through hot water, but also his helmet AC also failed. It was no longer pushing cold air into his helmet. It was pushing hot air into his helmet. It was grabbing air from outside of the car and pushing it into his helmet. So I can't imagine that's a double whammy on the first hot race of the season. And for AJ Allmendinger to get out of that car and do that, I would consider Allmendinger one of the most physically fit drivers in the field. He's constantly running, he's constantly riding a bike, he's constantly working out way more than I'd say most drivers. And nowadays in NASCAR, I think drivers are more physically fit now in NASCAR than they've ever been. Because back in the day, I don't think many. I mean, there was some like Mark Martin. I think was one of the first drivers that wanted to make sure he was physically fit. But most drivers didn't really work out all that much back in the day. They would get in the car and get out of the car. That was about it. Some would work out to a certain degree, but nowadays these drivers have gyms and the team facilities and the team buildings. So to see Allmendinger, one of the most physically fit drivers in the Cup Series garage, just laying on the ground like he was, really says how horrible the conditions in that race car were throughout the day. And Dinger still ended up getting a top 10. That's amazing. To be that uncomfortable in the race car, dealing clearly with how much he had to deal with in that event, to get a top 10 is insane. So hats off to AJ Allmendinger. Hats off to him because that is very impressive. Very, very impressive. And I'm glad Allmendinger is okay. Once I saw him get put on the stretcher and him sitting up the way he was, I'm like, he's probably just very, very dehydrated and he just needs to get some fluids. And that's what it ended up being. He just needed to get some IV, needed to get some fluids, needed to get some body armor or whatever. Celsius I don't think is going to do that for him, but you know what I'm saying? Just needed to get some electrolytes in him and just rebuild, get some water in him, get some IV. And he seemed okay. He seemed good after that. So I'm happy he's okay. I'm happy he wasn't hurt or had like heat stroke or something like that. I'm very glad it wasn't, because that initial pan to him really honestly freaked me out. I was watching the race with my dad, as I usually do, and I was like, hopefully he got out of the car and just sat down and then decided to lay down just because of how exhausted and dehydrated he was. Because Fox, don't do that, please. I know you're trying to update the fans and keep them updated on what's going on. Like they would do the same thing if someone started throwing punches in the middle of an interview. They're just going to randomly pan to the fight and then pan back to the interview and then cover the fight afterwards. But for them to just quickly pan to that number 16 Kaulig car and seeing Allmendinger just laid out on the ground and everybody surrounding him and then people kind of rushing in to help was a very scary view. Very scary view at first, but I'm glad AJ Allmendinger's okay. I think Alex Bowman's okay as well. So I'm real happy both those drivers are okay. And cool suits are a blessing, but they could also be a curse. So some of these drivers really need to think about if they want to be cool suit guys or not, because we head to Phoenix this next week, potentially could be pretty hot. Head to Vegas the next week, could also be pretty hot. And then we're getting into the springtime, into the summertime. So a lot of these drivers are going to be wearing cool suits for the next couple of months. So it's something to really think about. But let me know your thoughts on cool suits. Let me know your thoughts on AJ Allmendinger, Alex Bowman, Myatt Snyder. Let me know your thoughts on all of that. All right, let's get to the end of this race where it ended up being Shane Van Gisbergen looking to go 6 straight at road courses, and then Tyler Reddick trying to start off the year with 3 straight victories, something that has never happened. SVG I think would have tied Jeff Gordon. Jeff Gordon won 6 straight road courses, so SVG was trying to tie that record while Tyler Reddick was trying to get a whole new record of his own. So that's one storyline I didn't really hear mentioned in the last couple of laps that I think should have been brought up more, that both of these drivers are essentially trying to break records. One's trying to tie a record and one's trying to break it and have sole possession of the record. And drivers have won 3 in a row before. I know Mark Martin's done it before. I know Jeff Gordon's done it before. So drivers have won three in a row. I think there was some confusion from some people online about that. But drivers have won 3 races in a row in the Cup Series before, but never to start the year. It's happened 5 times before this season that a driver started off the season winning 2 straight races, but Reddick ended up getting 3 of them. And we'll talk more about Reddick in a second. I kind of want to talk more about their battle and Shane for a second. Shane Van Gisbergen, I think the last time we saw Shane, because most of the time we come to these road courses, I personally think Shane Van Gisbergen is like Jean Girard in Talladega Nights out there. He's just out front sipping his macchiato. Like, he's just out front hanging out. He's just chilling. Just having a good time, maybe driving 80 or 90%, saving those rear tires. And right when somebody gets to him, he's like, no, 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 and begin to pull away again. That's just the way I look at Shane. But there's only been one other time. Well, I think last year at COTA, he was working pretty hard too. He definitely struggled last year at COTA as well. That was the last time he lost a road course race before this weekend was at COTA. But the time before that, and what the end of this race really reminded me of, was Watkins Glen when he was trying to beat Chris Buescher and couldn't. Chris Buescher outraced him at the end of that race. And that's what I saw here. It looked like to me that Reddick just outpaced Shane Van Gisbergen. I think there's definitely to be an argument to be made that the Toyotas were possibly a little bit quicker on the straightaways. But nonetheless, Tyler Reddick, he held him off. He forced SVG, Shane Van Gisbergen, to use up his tires. And then Shane started dropping back pretty quickly. He began to fall into the clutches of Christopher Bell. At the end of this race, Reddick was running around 3 or 4 tenths a lap quicker than Shane Van Gisbergen. But before that, Shane was howling him. He was all over his bumper, racing clean. Maybe if Shane decided to get a little bit dirty, but it was a little bit, in my opinion, it was too early to really do a move like that, moving somebody out of the way. I think it was possibly a little bit too early to do that. And Shane, for the most part, I think races with respect. I think sometimes he takes advantage of the way the NASCAR system and the NASCAR rules are compared to supercars when it comes to aggression. But I think he usually does that with like payback. If someone moves him out of the way, he's going to move him out of the way. And that's just kind of how Shane races. Other than that, I think he races with respect. So I didn't expect him to move him out of the way or send him or wreck him. Maybe with like 2 or 3 laps to go, that could have been a different story. But it just didn't end up coming down to that. Reddick ended up driving away. Bell, he almost fell into the clutches of Bell and Gibbs, who had fresher tires, who got tires on that last caution, which I think was the right call. I think that was if Blaney maybe did that, Blaney could have potentially won the race, I think. I think that would have been a great call from Blaney because Blaney struggled on the older tires. I think that was just a really bad call by the 12 team on that one, in my opinion, and cost Blaney maybe a chance to at least compete for the win, because I think him, Reddick, SVG, and then potentially Zilisch had the best cars and were the fastest all race long. But tires were the thing that ended up hurting SVG. Because SVG just fell off at the end of this race. Reddick ended up driving away to get his third straight win to start the year. What a moment. I was thinking in the last couple laps, I'm a huge fan of Shane, and clearly I'm wearing my Reddick shirt, so I'm at least somewhat of a fan of Reddick. I would definitely say I'm a fan of most drivers. I would say I'm a fan of most drivers, depending on what way you look at it. I'm not obviously a diehard of either Shane or Reddick. I think my diehard status really just lands with Kyle Busch, Connor Zilisch, and probably Denny Hamlin as my diehard guys at this point. But I like that's a better way to say it. I like both Reddick and Shane Van Gisbergen. So if you ask me who I like more, I like Shane more because I just like his attitude, and I think it's always great to see an international guy win. But in these closing laps, I truly didn't mind who won. Honestly, I kind of was even leaning a little bit in the way of Reddick just because of him winning back to back to back is fantastic for our sport. Michael Jordan being there, we're getting more promotion about NASCAR than we've ever had over these last couple of weeks. We're getting talked about constantly every single week. Robert Griffin III was a special guest for 23XI Racing this weekend, and they won. Michael Jordan, once again, gave a great interview at the end of this race, and he's like, it's a time for change. I think that's what he said. It's a time for change. This is pretty much his translation of Triple H saying it's a new era. Like, that's pretty much what he said. It's a new era in NASCAR right now. He's going to go to Phoenix next weekend. I don't know if that was originally in the plans, but with them going back to back to back, going 3 in a row, a three-peat to start the year is just, it's insane. It is insane after everything that happened last year. I've seen a bunch of people with the tinfoil hats on saying that, oh, NASCAR is letting them cheat. NASCAR is making this happen. Oh, 23XI's cheating. Like, come on, y'all. Come on. A lot of people out there are acting like Tyler Reddick isn't a great driver. Coming into this race, he finished top 10 in every single race at COTA. He finished in the top 5 in every single race but one. He won here in 2023. I thought coming into this race that if anybody was going to compete with Shane, I thought it was going to be Reddick, even over Zilisch, just because I personally don't think Zilisch is quite used to the Cup car quite yet. I think it's still going to take him a couple more weeks to really get used to the race car. I think the next road course we go to is San Diego, and I think he'll be a big competition to win that race when we get there. I think he's going to be more used to the car at that point. But I thought the biggest threat to win this race for SVG was going to be Tyler Reddick, and that's what he did. Tyler Reddick was able to outdrive Shane Van Gisbergen at the end of this race and get a victory. And I think a lot of people are doubting Tyler Reddick's ability. Before, obviously, Reddick struggled last year. I think that mainly has to do with everything off the track, mainly with his son, his young son, Rookie. Rookie ended up being at the racetrack this week as well, which was very cool. I think that was probably in my opinion, that was the main reason why he struggled so mightily last year, didn't get a win last year, and now has won 3 in a row. Because I think before last year, many considered Reddick to be one of the most pure talent drivers in the Cup Series, one of the most talented drivers on just raw speed and raw ability in the Cup Series. Personally, I have it Larson number 1, Bell number 2, Reddick number 3, just on pure raw talent. And Reddick did it again. Winning at Circuit of the Americas. I expect Reddick to be somewhat competitive at Phoenix. I wouldn't expect him to compete for a win there. It hasn't been necessarily one of his strongest tracks, but he does have the hot hand. At the moment, so that might be something to watch out for. But just hell of a job by Reddick. This is great for the sport. Bo was geeking me out. His older out of his 2 sons was geeking me out at the end of that race because I don't know if any of you noticed it, but right when Reddick stopped the car on the front stretch, Bo just immediately climbed up to the top of the car. One of the crew members was right there. It looked like he was trying to get him off the car. He was like, hey, come down. Get off the car. That's what it looked like. I don't know if that's actually what he was saying. I'm not a lip reader or anything, but it looked like he was trying to get Bo to get off the top of the car. And Bo, in his mind, is like, oh, we won. I know what I'm supposed to do now. I'm supposed to jump on the car and celebrate because that's been the thing the last 2 weeks. And then when Tyler Reddick gets out of the car, he's like, hey, Bo. Bo's in celebration ready position. Reddick's giving his interview. Some of you may have noticed this as well. Bo's in the background, like right next to Reddick, and he's like jumping up and down with joy. His face is all red, so that was pretty cool to see as well. Just awesome, man. I'm so happy for Tyler Reddick. He's such a great guy. He's such a great driver. He went through so much last season, and he's won 3 in a row. The spotlight of the sport is on him. Like, I don't think he's going to win most popular driver, but at this point, he might end up selling the most merchandise this year, which is something to make note of. I think he's probably going to end up selling the most merchandise this year. I know most people probably don't care about that, but selling merch is a big deal, I would say. I think that was one of the big reasons why, well, obviously the biggest reason why was the racing, the personalities, this and that, but a big reason also why NASCAR was very popular in the early 2000s and the 90s as well was because of all the merch. Like, everybody was wearing t-shirts, wearing NASCAR hats, whether they were in our world or not. Over the last couple of years, I think the racing jackets have been pretty heavily featured across all forms of pop culture. But maybe this is another reason why we could be at the forefront of pop culture is this of Tyler Reddick getting a three-peat. Tyler Reddick starting off the year with 3 straight wins. Michael Jordan being in attendance for all 3 races, I think is huge. Giving interviews in all 3 races, I think is huge. A guy that usually isn't going to really give a lot of interviews. He's just not that sort of guy. He's very public, but at the same time, very private, if that makes any sense. He just wants to live his life. He just wants to live his life, and he doesn't want to risk saying the wrong thing. He just wants to live. He just wants to live, and I respect the crap out of Michael Jordan for that. He's one of the GOATs I would say he is the GOAT of the NBA, but he's one of the GOATs just in pop culture and in sports in general. And just to have that happen, I loved the credit he also gave to Denny Hamlin. He was like, oh, I pay the bills and watch the races. Everything else, that's all Denny. This is Denny's baby. Denny's the one that told me to sign Reddick. So I was very happy for Denny to kind of get his flowers as well, because nothing against Michael Jordan. I think Michael Jordan winning is huge for the sport. It promotes the crap out of our sport. But there's been such a big spotlight on MJ the last couple of weeks. I think some people haven't really paid attention to Denny and haven't really give Denny Hamlin any credit for Tyler Reddick, for 2311 Racing to start the year. Because Bubba Wallace has started off the year great as well. He had 2 straight top 10s. And today, Bubba Wallace got 11th. He's second in points. So a hell of a start for 2311 Racing. And so for Denny Hamlin to finally get that little bit of spotlight, and some people that don't even watch that are like casual NASCAR fans or people that aren't even NASCAR fans just assume that, oh, this is just Michael Jordan's team. And that's just only Michael Jordan's team. But where do you think the 11 came from? Denny Hamlin. 2311 Racing. It's not 23 Racing. It's 2311 Racing. And Denny Hamlin got his flowers today, got his credit today, which Michael Jordan didn't need to do that. He didn't need to do that. But I thought that was very nice of him to give Hamlin his credit, because he deserves all the credit in the world for the way this is all going down. And it's crazy the butterfly effect for this situation is crazy, because who knows if that court case goes different, Reddick might not be racing for 2311 Racing right now. 2311 Racing might not even be racing, period, right now as a race team. So that court case going the way it did, butterfly effect is insane on that. The butterfly effect would be completely insane on that. So I just had to say that as well real quick. But another great moment for our sport, having Tyler Reddick being the first driver in Cup Series history to win the first 3 races of the season by winning the Daytona 500, winning at Atlanta, and now winning at Circuit of the Americas. But let me know your thoughts in the comments on Tyler Reddick getting 3 in a row, having a three-peat to start the season. All right, and that will do it for this week's edition of Car on the Hauler. A great weekend in Circuit of the Americas, great weekend in St. Petersburg. And next week, the NASCAR Cup Series and the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series will be heading to Phoenix Raceway. We'll also be joined by the IndyCar Series and the ARCA Menards Series, plus the ARCA Menards Series West, as they'll be doing a co-op race, if you will. All the main Menards Series guys and the West Series drivers will all be in the same race competing for that. And the Craftsman Truck Series is off next week at Phoenix. It's also off for Vegas, which I said earlier in the show, if you caught it, I think that's a huge mistake on their part, not going to Phoenix or Vegas over the next 2 weeks. The Truck Series, you will not see them in action again until Darlington here in a couple of weeks. So keep an eye out for that. But let me know your thoughts in the comments about the whole weekend as a whole. St. Pete, COTA for the Cup Series and the O'Reilly Series. Is there anything I didn't talk about here today that you thought was quite noteworthy? Let me know in the comments. And then also give your opinion on everything we talked about here today, whether it's the trucks, the O'Reilly Series, or the NASCAR Cup Series. But for now, I'm Trackside Larry saying peace.